Welcome to the Mormon News Roundup, your go-to source for the latest headlines and critical analysis on all things LDS.
Breaking news.
Join D-Vay's
Mormon News Roundup.
That's talent on loan from Kolob every Sunday and Monday night.
We will uncover the truth behind the news that matters most to the Mormon community.
Welcome back to the Mormon News Roundup. I'm your humble host, D-Vay's That's Talent on Loan from Kolob. It's July 13th, 2025. This is episode 169. I'm coming to you from the crossroads of the East, where the truth runs free. We will be ruminating on the great and spacious beehive today. Thank you so much for deciding to join us. What is on deck? Boy, we do have a big episode here today. We're going to be talking about Mike Lee. Once again, in the headlines, he's causing problems with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints leadership situation. Mormon church leaders are not happy with Mike Lee. We are going to tell you why. The IRS has given the green light to the Mormon church. With regards to what, you might ask? Well, if you stay tuned, you will find out. There are some dubious Mormon church growth claims, which we're going to dissect here. And finally, Cosmo the Cougar is getting busy. We have a fun episode. We're going to get you out of here in less than 40 minutes. Let's kick this right off with a national news story, which is causing so many headlines here. This is from Political, one of the biggest outlets out here. It says Mike Lee can't stop throwing social media grenades, and his church is not happy. The Utah senator's online persona has further damaged his already frayed relationship with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. See, the apple here, folks, has fallen far from the tree. Mitt Romney was my kind of Mormon. Mike Lee, on the other hand, no, far from it. Mike Lee might be bosom friends with Donald Trump. Mitt Romney certainly was not, since Mitt voted for the Donald's impeachment. Yes, Mike Lee posts a lot on social media, and he does it to the detriment of his church membership. And we're going to talk about that. In fact, this was from Chino Blanco out there on X. He said, this is the top story on Politico. And it's very interesting here how this really gained a lot of traction out there. And this is from the article itself here on Politico. And I'm quoting here. It says, it wasn't just Washington that was buzzing over Lee's response to the tragedy. Okay, and this was the tragedy of those Minnesota Democratic lawmakers who were gunned down by that psychopath. Mike Lee had some extremely insensitive tweets that discussed that. It also set off a debate in Salt Lake City, Utah, at the global headquarters of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. A discussion over how to respond, if at all, began in earnest, according to two people granted anonymity to discuss private conversations. See, folks, typically the Mormon Church doesn't want to wade into these political matters. They sit in their ivory towers like cowards and refuse to take sides. But this is really reached all the way up to the Insular Mormon Church headquarters here. Several of the church's senior leaders saw posts and were concerned, and I find that to be highly remarkable. Typically, we are supposedly told that these Mormon church leaders are very insulated, but it looks like they're following Mike Lee's social media accounts. You know, this is if you go back to the Mormon Leaks videos, which were from Ryan McKnight, Ethan Dodge, the Truth and Transparency Foundation, you'll find that Mormon church leaders are frequently briefed on current events. And it doesn't surprise me at all that they're following Mike Lee's horrific antics. Continuing from the article here, it says that Lee is a prominent Latter-day Saint, arguably the best known elected church member in the nation. I agree. In fact, Mike Lee is probably one of the most powerful Mormons alive. Certainly, in my opinion, you have Russell Nelson, which would be number one. And believe it or not, I believe that Taylor Frankie Paul might be one of the most powerful Mormons alive, and then maybe Mike Lee is number three. Yes, very important Latter-day Saint. His insensitive words were reflecting poorly on the faith at large, and this is what a lot of people who, after the Mike Lee fiasco about 2 weeks ago, were saying that he doesn't represent Latter-day Saints. On the contrary, I think he does quite well. One church official estimated that the backlash from Lee's posts would have severe repercussions for the church's public image. The first person said. There's been a lot of repercussions about Mike Lee. Of course, he did end up taking those disgusting tweets down, but he never apologized for it. And that, folks, is very Mormon. We'll just put it that way. Folks, I discussed all of these antics here from Mike Lee just a couple of episodes ago in episode number 167. I'm not going to bring this all back up here, but yes, Mike Lee's really crazy actions here are causing lots of problems with him and Mormon church leadership. See, if you go back and look at the Mormon Leaks videos, which I think are really important videos, if you've never watched all of them, I think you could watch all of them in about 5 or 6 hours. What we see is that Mormon church leaders take a very big interest in their elected officials. Especially in Congress. The Mormon Church had a tight relationship, for instance, with Senator Gordon Smith, who is a faithful Latter-day Saint, a former bishop. But I don't think that that Mike Lee has such a cozy relationship with Mormon Church headquarters officials, and that causes them a lot of consternation. They really regret that. I think that they wish that they did, but Mike Lee marches to the beat of his own drum, and many times that particular drum is a MAGA drum. There's no doubt about that. The Utah Senator, this is from another news article here. It says the Utah senator alienates conservative Mormon church leaders with his bellicose MAGA stunts. See, this is the deal here, is that through the church's editorial page on this in the Deseret News and in other ways, the church has frequently brought out editorial posts criticizing MAGA and Donald Trump in particular. But the difference here is that Mike Lee sips from the MAGA Kool-Aid, and that does not sit very well with Latter-day Saint leaders in church headquarters. That's the difference between him and Mitt Romney. And I got this on X here. It says that the church itself is a far more moderating force than the vast majority of elected leaders on the right who espouse membership. And that's probably a good point. The church is certainly to the right, no doubt about that, but they're not as far out there as Mike Lee. And this is from McKay Coppins, who did that incredible biography on President Nelson here. He said that Mike Lee's, quote, based, end quote, online persona and Trump-era theatrics are a source of growing alarm among LDS church leaders. And this is according to Sam Benson, again from Politico. Mike Lee is far right, said one emeritus general authority, but the church is not far right. See, that's the deal here. And somebody else says, that they think that the reason that Mike Lee has really gone so far to the right is that he's gone through the second anointing. That's the reason that he behaves the way that he does without an ounce of shame or restraint. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if senior elected Latter-day Saint leaders like Mike Lee had gone through the second anointing, which of course is basically the last secret Mormon ceremony, which virtually guarantees a person eternal life. That's why he can't be controlled. I do wonder. Some of these are conspiratorial, but I do definitely wonder. Folks, let me know what you think about Mike Lee this week, causing a lot of problems with church headquarters. I find that to be very remarkable. Now, speaking of influencers out there, I do need to talk about my favorite shill for the Mormon Church, and that is Jasmine here. And she's going to talk about the marketing from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints having a possibly disproportionate impact on the influencer economy. And one result is more baptisms than at any other time in history. Some think that the church is enriching Latter-day Saint influencers through sponsored brand deals. And of course, we have the Secret Lives of Mormon Wives here. Let's see what Jasmine is talking about here.
The marketing from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is possibly having a disproportionate impact on the influencer economy right now. And one result is more baptisms than at any other time in their history. Some think that the church is enriching Latter-day Saint influencers through sponsored brand deals. Others have theorized that the church is shelling them money through YouTube and Google AdSense.
It's not a theory. We know that the church is paying Google for a number of different ads. And if you have a Mormon or an ex-Mormon related channel, then those ads appear during the middle of your channel. We know that the church is paying for that. That's not a theory.
I have now gone down through every rabbit hole trying to figure out where the church's advertising money is really going. And what I discovered kind of shocked me. From what I can tell, faith-promoting Latter-day Saint creators aren't the primary ones financially benefiting from the church's ad campaigns. The math just doesn't add up. But do you want to know who is? Watch the newest video on my YouTube channel to find out.
Hard pass here, Jasmine. I can tell you that we covered this in great detail last week here with the Mormon Church paying influencers to shill for itself. We know that that is happening here. And Jasmine is claiming, and we'll find this out just a little bit more throughout our episode here, that this is that the reason that so many people are joining the church is because of all of these influencers out there. There might be a correlation there, but how do you prove a causation? I don't see how you do. Now, she was talking about the secret lives of Mormon wives there. By the way, I know the slide is a little bit small, but we could run this entire show off of the secret lives of Mormon wives, because what you get here is it's insane how much oxygen that these ladies take up. For instance, I get a Google alert every single day that tells me the amount of headlines that are associated with the word Mormon or Latter-day Saint. And this is just one particular day's Google alerts here. Every single one of these alerts is related to the secret lives of Mormon wives. I can tell you that this entire show here, if we were to really be faithful to Latter-day Saint news, over 50% of it would be composed of the secret lives of Mormon wives. I'm not going to cover that much on there because, I mean, season 1's over, season 2's over, the reunion's over. They're doing Dancing with the Stars. I don't understand how they continue to dominate headlines since they're really not doing anything of any particular substance out there. I mean, they have no substance to begin with. But yes, if I were to be genuine here, all of these, Michaela Matthews pranks pregnant Bessie Maley with thinking that she gave birth. She throws new shade at Dakota Mortensen, pregnant Bestie, all of this, they continue. She hugs newborn in sweet photos. Every single time that these women post something, literally there's going to be a news article. Whether they just post a video, post a photo, it's going to make the news. Literally 50% of the news that is generated with the word Mormon would be from these women. That's very interesting here, by the way. And there's been a lot of reactions, by the way, to Jasmine talking about influencers showing the secret lives of Mormon wives. And this is from one of my favorite X accounts out there. And I do say that tongue in cheek here. This is at Black Blessed LDS. He said, first quarter alone, convert baptisms went up 20% in every geographic area in the world. Wow, that's incredible. That's what Jasmine is saying. Let's just play that real quick for you. I just want to get that.
Oh, the church is only growing in Africa because people there are less educated and more easily brainwashed. First of all, why are you saying that out loud in 2025? Oh my gosh.
Because it's true. People have less education in Africa. They have less socioeconomic status. Therefore, they need church resources. They're more easily manipulated by Mormon church missionaries who do not tell them the complete story about the Mormon church. Instead of fessing up to that, you want to play politically correct about that. That's ridiculous.
Dunking on the church does not give you a pass on racial stereotypes.
It's not a stereotype to say that people in Africa have less education. They have less access to the internet. They have lower socioeconomic status. Therefore, they're not able to fully vet Mormon church claims like people could in more developed countries. This is why the church found a lot of success back in the 1990s, is from people who couldn't research the full history of the church. And unfortunately, the church's only successful spot in the entire world is in Africa.
But also, statistically speaking, it's just not true. Yes, it is true that there's insane growth in Africa right now.
Sorry, it's not insane growth. When you compare the Mormon church to the Seventh-day Adventists, or if you even compare it to Jehovah's Witnesses, those are both doing far, far better than the church per missionary per capita. It's not insane growth when compared to even the other restorationist restorationist churches out there. And the church is also lagging behind a number of other churches out there as well. A lot of Africans are joining religions. There's no doubt about that. But the Mormon church is not performing well when compared to other faiths.
Membership grew by 50% just since 2020. However, church growth is not limited to just Africa. In just the first quarter of this year, convert baptisms shot up by 20% in every single geographic area of the entire world. And as far as education goes, if the church were trying to swindle uneducated people, they are doing a horrible job of it, because the church is providing global educational access like nothing I've ever seen before through BYU Pathway.
Well, they're providing access to church correlated materials. They don't give you the access to education before you get baptized. That's really the point here.
Read this article to learn more about the church's educational efforts in Africa, and hit follow for more Latter-day Saint facts that cut through the rumors.
Yeah,
To those who claim
a lot of facts here from Jasmine. This is why I posted a response here to not only Black Bless, but to Jasmine herself. It says, wow, do you happen to have any objectively verifiable, independently assessed data to back up this claim of serious growth outside of LDS PR spin? In fact, the church claims that more people got baptized in the last 12 months than at any time in church history. That's incredible. Do you have any way for us to assess that claim? Or is this just another fairy tale that we're supposed to accept on blind faith, quote, because the church said so? You tell me, where's the objective stats on this? If you want to be given credit for big time baptisms, then you have to release full numbers, including people in the pews, including people who left the church. And of course, the church is not going to do any of that. We're just supposed to accept all of these claims on faith. And I know that Jasmine drinks the Kool-Aid very deeply and does not give a fig for critically investigating her own church, and that she blindly accepts every single church PR claim at face value. Some of the rest of us have what is called skepticism and critical thinking. Jasmine, you should really try it. It really makes life a lot better off. By the way, the LDS Church's HR legal department is also sending information to unit leaders, meaning ward or branch leaders, on how to report church employees if they don't have a current temple recommend. This is brought to us by Rebecca Biblioteca. Why am I not surprised? And continuing on, they're supplying the names of employees in that ward or branch and having the bishop check their status and then report back. Wow, Big Brother always taking care of the flock. This scenario happened to me when I was newly married and confessed to my bishop that I was a partial tithe payer, mostly because I made so little at BYU. That resonates very deeply with me. I believe Rebecca taught at BYU or worked for BYU for about 10 or 15 years. I, on the other hand, either worked full or part-time for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints for almost 24. I can tell you that the amount of pay that I received was a pittance compared to the other work that I did of a similar nature in other universities. I am not surprised at all that the Mormon Church wants people to spy on one another. Following message from the HR legal department of the church. Literally, folks, there's an HR legal department, not just an HR department, not just a legal department. There is an HR legal department of the church. And it says, here are the members that are working for church headquarters. Be sure to check to see if they have temple recommends. And if they don't, be sure to rat them out. The Mormonism is all about ratting on your fellow man. And I find this a type of email to be very distasteful. Let me know in the comments below what you think about it. Now, another big article happened this week here is that Chinese government officials have banned the LDS Church from any activities in Beijing. I find that to be very remarkable. Let's see what's going on there.
Developing news, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has been banned from Beijing. A civil affairs bureau in the city posted a notice on their website claiming the local branch had violated existing agreements between China and the U.S. A church spokesman tell us that they strive to, quote, honor, obey, and sustain the law in every country, and they encourage members to do the same. This comes amid recent crackdowns on foreign religious groups in China. You can read more on our website, abc4.com. If you went to...
Now, what's interesting, first of all, is a couple of years ago, my mother, who retired from BYU, went to work in China to teach English. And she, of course, is not of course, but she's a faithful Latter-day Saint. And every single week she would go to church. And in China already, the Chinese government forces or requires that outsiders like my mother, while she was in China for a year, attend a separate congregation that is almost completely white people. She said there was a couple of black people, but that was about it. Never will you basically cross the streams, as it were. You will never have mainland Chinese persons with foreigners. They don't want the Chinese government doesn't want that kind of influence. My only thing that I can think in this particular situation, I don't know it for a certainty, is that there was some crossing over of mainland China, the people from mainland China mixing with foreigners like my mother or other persons who are there to work in China. And that made it so that they ran afoul of the government. So the Chinese government has completely banned LDS church activities, which means those type of people are not even going to be able to go to church on Sunday anymore. Oops, looks like the Latter-day Saint Church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, messed that one up. And that kind of reminds me, if you go back 6 years ago to when President Nelson first took over, he announced that there was going to be a temple in the People's Republic of China. And the Chinese government has had a very dim view of that particular temple. In fact, it really hasn't had any work. There's no been groundbreaking. There's no announcement of the location as far as I know. And how's that going to work now that the church is banned from any activities in Beijing and maybe even in wider China? Whatever happened to that Shanghai temple? Let's see what Rebecca Biblioteca knows.
As has been widely reported at this point, China, Beijing area has shut down the LDS Church there. They have said that their gatherings did not adhere to government regulations, and they're done. So what about the temple in Shanghai that was supposed to be built? I thought I'd update you a little bit on that. That was originally announced in April of 2020, and everyone went ballistic. Then the Chinese government kind of said, we don't know anything about this. This is not really going to happen. You guys can't register here. You really can't build this.
Yeah.
Still, there was an article in the Church News about how exciting this was. Now,
just real quick, one of the reasons that temple was absolutely never going to happen is because inside of the temple, again, you would have the mixing of people who were not from China with people who were from China. And the Chinese government was never going to allow that. You have to have separate meeting houses, and the temple was not going to be separate. So it was a non-starter from the beginning. If you believe that Russell Nelson has a divine connection and can pray about these temples, how in the hell was this temple approved by the Mormon Jesus, since it will never be built in our lifetimes? I'm just going out on a limb here. See, I'm not afraid to give a prophecy, unlike President Nelson, but this temple is not going to happen, which calls into question his ability to pray about these temples.
In 2024, an article in the Church News, this is 4 years later, listed all the temples being built. It was off the list. There was no Shanghai China temple. But I just checked today, and it's back on the list. So I don't know what they think is happening with that Shanghai temple. It doesn't bode well.
Doesn't seem like the church is doing that well in China at this particular moment. It's had its hat handed to it, and I don't see how this Shanghai temple is going to be built. Now, the thing about me is, if my prophecy turns out to be false, then that's no big deal. But I just find it to be very remarkable. Why can't the church get its ducks in a row? First, they announced a temple with which they had no business building. It was taken off the list. It's put back on the list. The church has been banned in Beijing. A lot of consternation happening in China here. Just want to bring you a quick news update from my heart goes out to the people in Texas, from those floods. That's a very horrible tragedy here. The church's North American Southwest Area Presidency has released an announcement regarding those terrible floods, which I believe killed over 100 people, or even some more are missing here. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints issued a statement of hope and comfort on Monday, July 7th, just a couple of days ago, after the deadly floods in central Texas over the course of the last weekend. As of Monday evening, when the statement was issued, at least 100 people have been confirmed as died due to the flooding, and others are still missing. The death toll includes 27 children. So here is that statement from the area presidency. They mourn and pray for the lost, lost loved ones and friends. Let's see what's going on.
Area presidency of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints issued a statement of hope and comfort on Monday, July 7th, after the deadly floods in central Texas over the July 4th weekend. As of Monday evening, when the statement was issued, at least 100 people were confirmed as having died due to the flooding, and others are still missing. The death toll includes 27 children. The statement from the area presidency says they mourn and pray for those who lost loved ones and friends. The church is ready to provide relief efforts when given the go-ahead from local disaster response officials.
I certainly hope that the church decides to provide substantial resources to those who need to rebuild, but I can tell you from previous tragedies that the church typically does not. If you go back to the Maui tragedy from a couple of years ago, where I believe that about 5 people died and a number of Latter-day Saints lost their homes, the church, they gave a few So a little bit of food, a little bit of water, but nothing substantial. What I would expect from an organization that is worth almost $400 billion is that it would take care of its own members. And let me tell you how I would do that. Number one, the people who had lost their homes who are Latter-day Saints, I would reach into the church's coffers and buy them new homes. That's called substantial help. I would also provide those people, if they had lost jobs or others, temporary employment through the church until such time as they got back on their feet. So I would provide a significant amount of resources to these individuals, not just some food and not just some water, but the Mormon Church won't do that. They didn't do that in California when all of the Latter-day Saints lost their homes as well. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that they're not going to do it again. They will provide, I don't know, minimal resources, but when you have $400 billion at your disposal, I argue that there is a substantial burden on you to provide help in times of need. The other thing that you will not see is any senior Mormon church leaders touring this area. And that's for one reason that President Nelson has not left the state of Utah except for one weekend since 2020. He doesn't go anywhere. And quite frankly, he doesn't do anything. You won't see any member of the First Presidency there. And I doubt that you will see an apostle there. In fact, it was over a year in Maui before the church sent a senior representative in any substantial portion. And it took months until Jeff Holland went to California. They only come in after everything's been done. See, if I was a leader of an organization who claimed to be the church's shepherd, I would have people there as soon as possible, arm in arm with the people who were harmed, ready to write significant checks. That's the difference between what I believe to be good leadership and what I believe to be just more PR spin that we got from this particular week. You know, I follow Nancy Rigdon over there on X here, and she posted this. It's really interesting out here. She says, going to sacrament meeting isn't a safe place anymore. And that's because you're seeing this from DesNat adjacent individuals on X here, like Captain Mahanrai, who I have had interactions with and is really a disturbing individual. He says, hey, everyone, we need to do the right thing. Help your country and yourself. Report all illegal Latter-day Saints. Keep an eye on those people in the congregation. So if you don't have the proper documentation and you go to church, someone's going to report you and get you deported. You know, this is going back to that earlier article, which talked about spying on one another. It sets up a police state here in the Mormon congregations. If you're not fully documented, or one of your family members isn't, or I don't know, you have some type of an issue, is it safe to go to church knowing that fellow Latter-day Saints like Captain Mahanrai are going to turn you into ice? I very much doubt that it is. Now, our biggest article here for the week, our number one article here, is the change in the IRS reporting here. And this is reported here from the New York Times. Big article here. It says the IRS says churches can't endorse candidates from the pulpit. This is a major change here, carving out an exemption to a decades-old ban on politicking by tax-exempt nonprofits. And of course, just to refresh your memory, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is a nonprofit, and so is Ensign Peak Advisors. They're just run-of-the-mill regular nonprofits. And in times past, those could not do two things. Number one, they could not endorse a political party or a political platform, and they also could not endorse politicians themselves. Otherwise, they could run afoul of the IRS. Now, the IRS rarely enforces that particular aspect. I think it's called the Johnson Amendment, but the church, has taken that to the very nines. The church is terrified of losing its tax-exempt status, so it took great pains to make sure that it remained "quote unquote" politically neutral at all times. Well, the IRS is signaling that they're going to open up the gates for not only the church to endorse political candidates, but really all nonprofits here. And how did the Utah's faith leaders and the LDS Church respond to this IRS allowance of political endorsements from the public? Well, the church really didn't do much about this particular change in the IRS. It says Utah's predominant faith pointed to a familiar statement, and this is from the church's spokesperson here, Doug Anderson. He didn't comment on the IRS ruling itself, but simply pointed to the faith's long-standing political neutrality statement. And of course, just to flush this out just a little bit, the IRS made that declaration in a court filing in a Texas lawsuit involving an evangelical media coalition that sued challenging what's known as the Johnson Amendment as a violation of their First Amendment free speech rights. Though not really enforced, the Johnson Amendment allowed faiths to weigh in on social issues, but prohibited religions from endorsing or opposing political candidates. And what the IRS is signaling here is that they're not going to be enforcing the Johnson Amendment any longer here. And the church, what did they do in response? Well, they just said, hey, we're not going to change how we do business, even though we could. We are going to remain politically neutral. That is not at all surprising to me. Now, the IRS says churches can endorse candidates, which is definitely going to impact church. It's going to impact politics across the Beehive State. It's going to
Hamas didn't just invade.
it's going to affect politics across the entire nation, especially with regards to Latter-day Saint leaders. The declaration here is really, really important here. When a house of worship in good faith speaks to its congregation through its customary channels of communication on matters of faith in connection with religious services concerning electoral politics viewed through the lens of religious faith, it neither participates nor intervenes in a political campaign within the ordinary meaning of those words, the IRS filing added. I believe that this is a good decision, in my opinion here. Let's find out what it is saying.
It would upend over half a century of codified separation of church and state.
I'm Ben Winslow in Salt Lake City. Churches have been allowed to weigh in on social issues without fear of losing their tax-exempt status for decades. Now, the IRS says that should extend to cover political candidates. The impact of that decision could be more pronounced here in Utah, a state that was founded by a religion, and there's a lot already made about church and state.
We focus on issues, we focus on the needs of people and not political partisanship.
Reverend Bridgette Weir is politically active, but she draws a line.
I hope that as people who follow Jesus, that we will indeed use our faith to ground us and how we make those decisions about who we vote for, what bills we think are good, what initiatives we think are good, because we are called to love our neighbor as ourselves.
In a Texas lawsuit, the IRS now says it believes churches should be able to endorse or oppose political candidates without fear of losing their tax-exempt status. Their declaration on what's known as the Johnson Amendment could have a big impact here, where religion is a part of Utah's statehood when Mormon pioneers arrived more than a century ago. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is a big cultural influence in Utah, and it also has influence on local politics, weighing in on things like liquor laws, LGBTQ rights, and cannabis.
I think if you look at the makeup of the legislator versus the population of Utah, you see significantly more legislators representing the LDS faith than you do people in Utah. And I think that's extremely exacerbated compared to other states.
The left-leaning policy group Alliance for a Better Utah has criticized the church's involvement in politics in the past.
I think would be very problematic for the state.
So far, the church has not responded directly to Fox 13 News' questions about the IRS decision, but did point to prior statements that the church does not seek to elect government officials, support or oppose political parties, or generally take sides in global conflicts. One expert on religion and tax policy doubts the faith will jump in.
In most cases, if they weren't already doing it, they're not going to start now. It doesn't change the law as the law actually stands. In rare occasions, if a church was on the border about doing it, they thought they wanted to, but they didn't because of the IRS, they're probably, this maybe gives them permission.
While she says she knows of some clergy who are already doing it, Reverend Weir says she still won't.
I encourage people to vote their conscience. I encourage people to vote from a place of mercy, compassion, love, grace. And that is where I draw the line for myself as clergy.
Now, President Trump has threatened to get rid of the Johnson Amendment before, and earlier this year, Republicans in Congress introduced legislation to do it. In Salt Lake City, Ben Winslow.
Okay, so a couple of quick thoughts about this. First of all, I do believe in the separation of church and state. I think that there is way too much church in our state. However, I believe very, very strongly in the freedom of expression. That includes your First Amendment right to speak your mind. And if we go back and think about one of Mitt Romney's most controversial statements out there, it's that corporations are people. And in some ways, he's right. Corporations are people, and you don't shed your First Amendment rights merely because you're a corporation or a nonprofit. The idea that you can't say what you want to say or lose your tax exempt status, I disagree with it. Your First Amendment rights are really immutable. We have the Bill of Rights, and I believe that any organization should be able to say whatever it is that they want to say within bounds and still be okay. I know. Leave me a comment below what your thoughts are about this particular bill, because I'm still kind of making up my mind about it. But I am particularly, I'm in favor of it from what I've seen here today. So let me know your thoughts. You can follow the Mormon News Roundup. We are on Instagram, we are on TikTok, we are on Facebook, and we are on X. But generally what I'm seeing here, I'm in favor of the repealing of this amendment. But let's get a quick one more take here from one of my favorite accounts out there, No Nonsense Spirituality, Britt Hartley there. She's going to weigh in here on this particular bill. So this particular what's happening
IRS
here.
says that churches can officially endorse political candidates without violating their tax-exempt status. This is actually Trump fulfilling one of his promises from the first term when he promised to totally destroy the Johnson Amendment, which prohibited churches from doing this. This change is more signaling than anything, because only one church has ever lost their tax-exempt status, and it was in 1992 when a church took ads against Bill Clinton. The majority of Americans don't even really like when churches officially back one candidate over another. What it does signal, though, is this broader movement where churches are gaining more political power under the guise of religious freedom. So for churches, even though it may not actually change how they function, it's counted as a win because it's gaining more political power. My hope for what happens with this is that as the pendulum goes towards more religious power, that there's such a backlash against it by the time, we're sick of Christian nationalism collectively, that when the pendulum starts swinging the other way, we could actually get laws that finally force churches to provide community service if they want their tax-exempt status. There are many countries that already do this. That's the agreement that you make. You get tax-exempt status because you're running a soup kitchen, you're feeding the homeless, you're marrying people, you're doing things for the community. And if you can't prove that you are, then you shouldn't be able to get tax-exempt status. And that is something that I hope happens in my lifetime, that there is a chance happens in my lifetime, as other countries have made that move, where you force a church like Mormonism that just has billions of dollars. It says that it gives to humanitarian services, but most of that is just like counting their missionary hours or counting the money that is fast offerings that just goes back to that people. But when, like Phoenix, Arizona, when all the churches gather in order to provide, soup kitchen and homeless aid and stuff like that, the Mormon Church doesn't participate. And so I would love to see all of this movement with the pendulum going this way eventually come back and finally have churches in this country only be able to get tax-exempt status if they will actually prove that they provide community services and not just to their own people.
Now, I'm definitely in agreement with that. Some of the countries out there, for instance, like Australia, you only get a tax-exempt status in proportion to the amount of charity that you do as an organization. And here's the big problem in Australia is that the Mormon Church exaggerated its charitable claims for years in order to get full tax-exempt status through the use of shell companies. We've covered that before on the Mormon News Roundup. And yes, Britt, I do appreciate that this repeal or the IRS signaling that they're not going to be enforcing the Johnson Amendment is mostly performative. I'm generally in favor of it because I am a huge First Amendment advocate, and I think that corporations should have the ability to say whatever it is that they want to say, including nonprofits. Nonprofits, you don't shed your First Amendment rights merely because you're a nonprofit. I don't see how that works. So if I'm wrong about that, let me know in the comments below. I'd be very grateful for that. Our final article here of the week here, I do hope that this doesn't get copyright struck because this definitely has some music behind it. And by the way, if you want to support the Mormon News Roundup and not run afoul of any of the copyrights, if you go find the Mormon News Roundup on Patreon, you can watch all of the podcasts ahead of time without ads and no copyrights. But Cosmo the Cougar, well, he's getting busy, folks. Let's see what he's doing. This is incredible here. Now that music might run me afoul of YouTube. I'm not sure about that. I'm going to have to turn that music down here. Is this the BYU Cougars? Boy, I'll tell you what, those BYU cheerleaders, that's not what I'm used to seeing here. This is what caught my eye. This got millions of views here. This is insane. This is from Cosmo Cougars official account here. Boy, I used to think that those BYU cheerleaders dressed conservatively here, but actually, no, folks. This is the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders here, those famous cheerleaders down in Dallas here. Cosmo is teaming up with them. This is why the comment section here is absolutely gold. It says, does this break the honor code? Well, I kind of think that it is. Whoa. Some people thought, wow, I thought BYU upgraded its BYU uniforms. No, that's not what happened here. And of course, the city where BYU has canceled the dance class because it did not align with city values. And yet they're over here dancing with the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders. Okay. It's an unexpected collaboration that we didn't know that we needed. Wow, that's crazy. How did this collaboration come to be? Very interesting stuff here. Cosmo is really, he's cutting loose. Boy, Cosmo is really letting it loose. Wow. I do like the dance though. Boy, Cosmo, if you don't like Cosmo, boy, something probably wrong with you. That's all I can say. Folks, we did it. The Mormon News Roundup. Folks, tomorrow night, Monday night, we have the Mormon movie reviews every Monday night at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Tomorrow, I will be reviewing The Singles' Second Ward. For time and all eternity was the easy part. Kirby Hayborn in the height of his comedic powers. And I am such a big fan of Aaron Swenson. And also in this one, we have Will Swenson, no relation to Aaron Swenson, but I will watch absolutely anything that Aaron Swenson is. Big fan. And Kirby Hayborn, wow, he's still an active member, by the way. Will Swenson has left the church here. This is Hailstorm Entertainment, the now defunct, was very active around the time of the 2000s, released a lot of these type of videos. I do like The Singles' Second Ward. This is a sequel to The Singles' First Ward here. Folks, you are invited tomorrow night, 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I want to give a shout out to the people who support this particular podcast, including over on Patreon, Scab, Bob, RMW, David, Blaine, Brent, and Sophronia. Special thanks to Sophronia, and over on our YouTube members, Emrak, Starla, Jeffrey, Garrick, and Lee. Thanks so much for supporting the Mormon News Roundup. We're giving you a short episode this week, but I think that we gave you your money's worth. Please like and subscribe before you leave, and always remember to think celestial, and remember that no unhallowed hand can stop the Mormon News Roundup from progressing.
This D-Vase, his news roundup, is becoming a significant problem.
More and more are tuning in. They're starting to question.
We need a strategy to counter this, and quickly.
I am inevitable.
Brothers, the Mormon News Roundup is becoming a significant problem.
D-Vase's influence grows daily. What can we do to counter this?
You can't stop me.